Hey everyone, welcome to The Explainer. Today we are doing something a bit wild. We're completely shifting how we look at biology by exploring the triad of oncological failure, and we're doing it entirely through the lens of the All That's Holy system. Our main goal here? To eradicate the random mutation myth once and for all. We're going to explore how cancer isn't some random biological error. No, under this framework, it's actually a pressurized container failing to execute a mandatory mechanical split, all because of strict density and pressure imbalances. So let's jump right in.
Now, in the All That's Holy framework, you have to understand that we are operating within a very finite, highly predictable set of physical rules. What we're looking at is a 13-layer closed system architecture. Under this specific system, there's no such thing as an endless void. Literally everything from an entire universe all the way down to a single microscopic biological cell operates as a closed, perfectly calculable machine following strict geometric laws. So, here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the infinity split mechanics, then move on to type 1, the popcorn cage. After that, type 2, the weak wall, followed by type 3, zero anchor drift. And finally, we'll wrap it all up with the triple onco completeness matrix.
All right, section 1, the infinity split mechanics, the rules of the machine. To really grasp this, we need to look at the central metaphor of this whole system, which relies on boron curvature. You have to stop thinking of a cell as a squishy biological blob. Instead, view it fundamentally as a pressurized, closed spherical membrane that's under constant tension. It's like a breathing, 13-layer container that inhales, exhales, and is constantly managing its internal pressure against the external environment. Now, this next part is absolutely crucial. It's how we define the word infinity. In the All That's Holy system, infinity is not some endless, abstract mathematical concept. It's actually critical mass. It's a real physical transition point where a pressurized container reaches perfect equilibrium. And this framework argues that cancer is simply a predictable mechanical failure to pass this exact threshold. The cell builds tension up to critical mass, but pressure mismatches block it from moving forward.
This physical reality creates a mandatory cycle. Step 1 is infinity minus 1. That's the highest stable state where the cell is fully charged up. Step 2 is infinity itself, the critical balance point. Then we hit step 3, which is infinity plus 1. This is where the container is overloaded and a mandatory split absolutely must occur. Finally, step 4 is the reset. When everything works perfectly, the cell divides smoothly. But if there's a pressure mismatch, say too much external pressure, or just too little internal strength, the cell is physically blocked from executing that mandatory infinity plus 1 split.
Which brings us to section 2. Type 1, the popcorn cage, crushed from the outside.
Picture a cell that's basically locked in a vise. On the outside, you've got incredibly high external pressure. Think of it like being trapped inside an intensely dense, rigid scar tissue cage pushing inward. But on the inside, you've got the cell's rising internal tension. The cell is just doing its job, right? It's accumulating mass and spiking its pressure toward that critical mass ceiling. But because its external environment is packed as tight as concrete, it's totally trapped.
So what actually happens mechanically? Well, the local cells are trapped in this rigid vise. The internal pressure spikes right up to that hard infinity ceiling, and the cell desperately wants to execute its infinity plus 1 split, but it can't. The container fails to distribute that extreme crushing load. And the result? The cell literally popcorns. It catastrophically shatters its boundaries, which results in those aggressively deformed multinucleated tumor shapes that we see in type 1 solid cancers.
Okay, let's look at section 3. Type 2, the weak wall, bursting from the inside.
Now, this is the exact opposite mechanical failure from what we just talked about. The sources call this the superfat structural blowout. And this failure is driven by an excess of soft, low-density mass in the body. Because of all this excess, the cell's own outer lining becomes structurally weak and degraded. So as the normal internal tension builds up, it completely overpowers that degraded outer membrane. The wall just slips and bubbles out prematurely. This triggers a sudden, explosive, and chaotic chromosome shattering right from the inside out.
Moving on to section 4. Type 3, zero anchor drift, losing the time lock.
With type 3, the cell lacks an external anchor entirely. It just drifts freely in fluid, completely losing its structural time lock. Now, in medical terms, we're talking about liquid cancers here. Things like leukemias, lymphomas, and myelomas. They don't form those solid geometric tumors. Instead, they drop their local drag tension and just float completely free in the bloodstream. You see, in a healthy, solid organ, a cell's internal microfibers are anchored really firmly to a surrounding matrix. That gives it the friction it needs to build up tension. But type 3 cells? They break those physical connections. They drift continuously through pressurized liquid highways. And without any structural friction against a solid wall, they lose their spatial coordination, their time lock, and they just replicate dynamically as unanchored velocity packets.
So you might be wondering what actually causes a cell to drop its anchors like that. The sources point to some very specific mechanical catalysts. It begins with the complete loss of internal anchor hooks to the tissue, dropping structural friction down to zero. But the most fascinating triggers are environmental. Systemic low blood pressure creates this sluggish fluid stagnation where cells basically just stall out. Combine that with environmental toxic ash that thickens the liquid medium, and you've got a recipe for disaster. These low-pressure, highly toxic fluid dynamics literally force the cell to shear off its tracks and launch into a free-floating drift.
All right, Section 5, the triple oncocompleteness matrix, closing the loop.
This is where it all comes together. This framework takes the chaotic, confusing complexity of hundreds of different cancer names and simply reduces them down into 3 strict geometric pressure mismatches. Type 1 is crushed from the outside by a dense cage, leading to a popcorn blowout. Type 2 bursts from the inside due to a weak wall, causing a premature slip. And Type 3 lacks an anchor due to fluid stagnation, drifting freely and completely losing its time lock. It's a remarkably complete 3-state system of structural self-failures.
So, I want to leave you with this question to chew on. What happens to our understanding of disease when we view complex biology purely through the lens of structural geometry and physical pressure? By exploring the All That's Holy system today, we've looked at a theoretical model that strips away standard biology to focus entirely on physical constraints. It brilliantly reframes the random mutation myth, leaving us with a fascinating new way to think about the true mechanics of life and disease. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I really hope this sparked your curiosity as much as it did mine.